and thank you for joining us here on the Neutral Zone. I am Phil Milani, joined as always by my esteemed colleague, my partner in crime. Really, the best way to describe this person is my everything. It's at Aric DiLalla.
What's good, Phil?
Yeah, what's happening, man? What's up? What's up, dude?
It's the tone.
Dude, you got a nice QZ on today.
Dude, you have a nice QZ on today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Swanson, good flannel.
Yeah.
Back on my bleed.
At Denver Broncos joining us here in the studio. Swanson, the beard came in handy this week, huh?
Oh, yeah. The snow.
Yeah.
That keeps me nice and warm, just like the flannel.
Got your paper towels and your axe?
Yep.
You're ready to go.
Where's your ox?
Yeah.
Ox would have been handy. Although the roads were fine.
No, the roads are
Ox
fine.
cord. That's what you got.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's good. That's a good one.
Yeah, pretty nice. We got a great episode.
Naturally.
NZ Nation.
You think this one will be an hour and 45 minutes?
People like that, I heard.
I did hear
Feedback, positive.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. No, that's what.
For that classic
Mega-
nearly
it was a
2-hour
It was a
Mega.
mega ep. Mega. That's like 3 commutes, 3, 4, so
Yeah.
it's
Or it depends really
settle
where
in.
you're commuting
Settle
to.
in, really,
You're trying to commute this morning. Just one commute.
Yeah, exactly. With the snow. Yeah. I don't think we'll go quite as long this time.
I-70 closed down. Maybe not even half of that commute.
Last week, we were just so pumped up about Jim Harbaugh. We just couldn't handle ourselves.
You just every other second, Jim.
Yeah. Jam!
Yeah. Now it seems like
I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
you never say never.
You never say never.
Some weird things going on over at Michigan.
At Michigan, yeah. Strange times.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the president of a university just being so enthusiastic about Jim Harbaugh? Like you should be like nervous about or not nervous, but more like you should be excited about what's happening over in the business school.
Well, you don't know
what's
that
going on.
the president is not excited about that. You've just seen one tweet, probably.
That is
right?
true. I'd never heard of that.
Yeah,
you've
you
never
followed
heard
him before?
Yeah,
You've never-
fact check, true. This seems, normally I'm getting that news from Schefter. This time it was the president at Michigan.
Yep.
Santa Ono.
I enjoyed that in the statement that he put out. The statement was in the copy of the tweet and then also in the quote graphic.
Yeah.
Really nice to have it the same thing in both places.
Yeah. I don't know. That doesn't bother me.
Good.
I just want the info.
Yeah.
I'm here for the info.
And then Jim, he said, something about happy. Don't out happy.
Yeah.
You talking about the elephant?
They were in a hurry to get
That's
that
a
out.
throwback. Yeah.
So, but now we're moving on.
Moving on.
The NZ.
So you think
is moving on.
no chance?
I don't know. Well, never say never.
Yeah.
I think one thing about this Broncos ownership group is that if they want somebody, they get them.
Like you notice that Swanson coming back on the podcast kind of coincided with the ownership change.
Yeah.
They wanted Swanson on the podcast.
They said.
So he's on the podcast.
We're tight.
I don't know how much that cost.
We're really close.
You don't want to know.
Because
You
before
don't
we
wanna
couldn't
know.
afford Swanson.
No.
They lured
No.
me back in. We're friends.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How much, Swanson?
I've
Why don't you
tell
tell
us.
It's friendship.
Tell us.
The friendship.
Oh, just the
is-
friendship.
Yeah.
Tell us how much.
You think Phil and I do this for the friendship?
You're my everything, man.
Yeah, that's true.
My everything. It's more than a friendship. It's just it's everything.
I was reading a book recently.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh.
Just under my desk after everyone had left the office. And it was about this. It was fiction.
Podcast?
It was fiction, but it was about this young woman who escapes from Poland during World War II to America and finds her love that is that she's been separated from during the war.
He was already here
No, they were both in Poland, but they got separated.
while they were escaping.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, got it.
But throughout the book, he calls her my everything. And I really enjoyed that.
You connected with that part?
Yeah.
Good. Nice story there.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing
When was
that
this
into
book
the-
written? Were y'all the
Yeah.
inspiration?
I don't know.
Yeah, they listen to the
listen.
Neutral Zone.
Yeah, I think it was called The Things We Cannot Say, in case anyone wants to listen.
Well, we
read
say my everything.
That's true. That's
Kelly
true.
Rimmer, if you're out there,
Really?
shout out.
Yeah. We just shout outs later in the show, Swanson.
Good
I didn't wanna
book. Really
forget.
nice book.
Yeah. So why don't we update everybody on what's going on with the Broncos coaching search?
Yeah, as of Thursday morning.
Everything we know at the time of recording this, we'll let you know. and we'll offer some thoughts on it.
Some analysis.
You know, from all reports, it seemed like the Broncos meeting with Sean Payton went really well. So
You sounded a little bit
Get into-
unsure as you were saying that.
no, I'm saying it. By all accounts, it went really well. Talk about what that situation could look like moving forward. What would it take from having an initial meeting and an interview, and then to him being the next head coach for the Broncos? What would it take? What's going to have to happen? And then also maybe some under the radar guys. Eric,
Whoa.
what do you think?
Have they risen to the radar?
I think they're on the radar now.
Got it.
Yeah.
So some on the radar guys.
They were under the radar. Now they're on the radar.
Well, we probably should have talked about them being under the radar when they were under
We
the
should
radar.
have. I think that would have been a really good idea.
Wish you would have thought of it.
I don't know why I didn't think of that. Now they're on the radar. Everybody knows about it. But before, it would have been nice because they would have been under the radar. We would have been the only ones talking about it.
Yeah, now they're on the radar. Everybody's talking about it.
They've always sort of been on my radar.
What's above on the radar? Or they're just two?
None.
They're just
there's
under.
radar. Yeah, you're either on or under.
It doesn't really. It seems like you could be above the radar then, right?
No.
Well, if you can be under
if you're
something.
under the radar, on the radar is above the radar.
What?
Yeah, because you're like, nothing is like.
If you're under the chair, then you're under it. If you're sitting on the chair, then you're
I'm
on the
above
chair.
it. I'm above the chair.
You're not.
When I
You're
sit on
on-
a chair, I'm
you're-
above the
you're-
chair.
you're
What are you
on the
talking
chair.
about?
You're not above,
I'm
the
above
chair.
the chair. I'm not under the chair. I'm above it.
You're not. You're on the chair.
What are you talking about? The chair is under me, therefore I'm above it.
The back of the chair is under you.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm on top of the chair.
Yeah, on top, on,
Above.
on.
I'm above the chair. I'm not
Okay.
below it, so I'm above it.
You can be
Just
equal.
kinda-
You can be equal.
It's kind of
with
like
it.
I'm above this conversation.
No, you're not.
I actually do like conversations.
Watson, what do you think?
That's true.
I don't wanna
Please,
get into
yeah. So we'll talk about some above the rate. I don't know how you want to talk about. We're going to talk about Dan Quinn and David Shaw, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just say we'll talk about those two guys.
Yep.
Anybody else you think we should throw into that, or do you think
Raheem
That's sort of
Morris has been
where-
getting a little bit of love.
where do you think the line is for the radar?
Oh,
Yeah, you know.
wow. Yeah, I think those three guys:
Okay.
Payton,
Yeah, Quinn,
Quinn,
Shaw.
Shaw. You want to talk about Jim just for old time's sake?
My guy Jim.
Yeah.
I think he's all of our guys. All ours guy.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Who's got a better pod than us? Nobody.
Nobody. Yeah.
That
You
could
were
have-
saying that
could
last
have been-
week.
That could have been our
You were like fired
tagline.
up. You were walking around. You were like,
Dang.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. If you'd like to let us know what you think about chairs and radars and stuff like that, Eric, how can people get involved in the show?
You can leave us an email at neutralzoneshow@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way. Or
Really
you can
nice.
leave a voicemail at 707-NEUTRAL. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at Aric DiLalla with an A, at Phil Milani with a PH. Non-traditional spellings.
Traditional spelling, Denver Broncos.
Traditional spelling, your dog, Javi. It's true.
Yeah. Javi. As in, like, just like
doxing your
Javier.
dog. Okay.
No, it's not a dachshund.
No, that's not. Any
That's
other
pretty
ways?
good, huh?
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
good.
nice.
That was nice. We like that kind of joke.
Or, Phil, you could leave a comment on YouTube.
Yes.
We'll
the
read it
Broncos
right
official.
here on the air.
What a coincidence. I've got some pulled up right here.
Let's hear it.
Let's go. Andy Marino, 79.
You think that's Dan's son?
Andy Marino, 79.
If you rearrange that, it's Danny Marino. 79.
What do you think?
Oh.
I don't know. They say, can you guys stop flirting and allow Swanson to at least feel loved?
Thank
I got to
you.
stop
Thank you.
reacting to the usernames before I hear whatever nonsense they
Because that I don't think that's Danny Marino.
Okay, Andy.
It's qualms he's thinking of. Qualms. Qualms.
We came up with that as we were walking out. Who said that?
As soon as we stopped, that is Dominic Cavazos. Dominic Cavazos.
Thank you, Dominic. We try to just humor Phil when we can.
Thank you, Dominic. Robbie Patzer. Robbie Patzer.
I think it's
You got a comment, Eric?
no.
Oh, you started and then you thought better, huh?
Yeah.
You're like, I don't want to go down that road.
I saw the exit ramp, but I said I'm going to stay
change
on
lanes, but you stayed on.
stay on the highway.
Yep. Last time I commented, I was mean to Ben. Ben's all right. Thumbs up emoji.
Perfect. I'm all right.
You're all right.
Fine.
You're all right. So this is from Darren Tadlock. Swanson is watching Left Behind on his laptop. Left Behind. I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
Maybe a movie because we made that joke last.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then since Swanson never has any idea what's going on the show, he's sort of just left behind.
Glass Onion.
A lot of Swanson
behind.
comments.
Yeah.
What's happening?
I think they identify with me not paying attention.
Wow.
Eli Lozano. Fast forward 20 minutes. Highly recommended. Glad these guys only do a sports podcast.
What?
What
does that mean?
I don't think they
Can we
like
do
the
another
intro.
podcast?
They don't like the introduction. I don't.
Now should we not do news or entertainment?
I don't. Well, we try to be someone entertaining.
Yeah.
Patrick Colborne. When Eric, spelled A-R-I-C-K.
Oh my gosh.
Very close.
Intentional.
Very close. When Eric said, quote, Trevor Lawrence is kind of a bust.
What? I never
don't
said that.
remember that.
Fact check
Then,
wrong.
Trevor Lawrence, hold my hair tie. So, some good comments.
I think if you listen to the show carefully, I said that the Jags were going to have a miraculous comeback and that Trevor was going to look amazing.
That's when you photoshopped that text message you
That
tweeted?
was 1 hour and 43 minutes into the show, so maybe he didn't make it.
Maybe he didn't listen. Oh, well, that's funny you mentioned that because Cindy H.
Cindy or Sydney?
Cindy.
Okay.
Cindy. Can you use it in a sentence? Cindy left a comment. It's like the spelling bee.
Yeah, I get
Country
it.
of
I don't
origin.
understand why.
Say it one more time. Sydney.
What, you just said Sydney.
Cindy.
What is
Cindy H,
going
okay.
on?
What did you do before you came into the studio?
That's like the spelling bee.
I know, but
Yeah,
then you
they
said
just-
you said a different word.
No, I didn't. Cindy.
Yeah. All right. What
Bill was laughing at his
Cindy.
joke,
What is-
and
yeah,
we
that
were
was my
laughing at
joke.
him.
What does Sydney have to say?
1 hour and 47-minute neutral zone show. Let's go. And it's not even my birthday. It keeps going. Enjoyed this during my nightly skincare routine. I like to multitask.
That's
Even though the Broncos games are done for the season, thanks for continuing to keep the fans informed. Excited for what's next.
That's a long skincare routine.
That is. Well,
Imagine us
you wanna look
taking
good?
like
as long as yours. You got really
for
nice
hair,
skin.
that's my hair routine.
Hair routine. Skin routine.
Yeah.
Your hair is
Oh,
really nice right now, I will
Thank
say.
you. Thank you.
Among the best.
I appreciate that.
Got a good quaff to it.
Thank you. I blew dry? I don't know, blow dry? I don't know. What's the past tense there? I use the hair dryer for extra.
I think qualm is what you're looking for.
Quaff?
whip.
Rip. Okay, let's get into our first topic here on this episode and talking about Sean Payton. The Broncos have interviewed with him this week, and they interviewed him. They have been known to interview with him earlier this week.
They interviewed him. They didn't interview with him.
Yeah, they interviewed him.
Yeah.
They interviewed him. Not
Do you understand the difference?
they had a meeting with him.
No, an interview is fine, but they didn't interview with him. He interviewed with the Broncos.
Yeah, but therefore they interviewed with him too. Right? See, kind of makes you think a little bit. Anyway, it reportedly went well.
What's wrong with you today? Yeah, it did reportedly go well.
And so one would think that now that Jim Harbaugh is no longer in the mix, that Sean Payton would be the top guy just based off of his past, his history, Super Bowl winning head coach. Aric, I'm wondering, where do you think things stand with Sean Payton right now? What are the Broncos having to consider right now before moving forward? And what does moving forward look like?
And that's a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's going to be a long little segment.
Got to keep that all straight in my head. Well, I think I saw a tweet from Mark Maskey, who of course works for the Washington Post. And he said that it appears that Sean Payton he favors Denver. They're kind of the leading team for him. I think Tom Pelissero said that it sounds like if Denver wants Sean Payton, that's something that can happen. We've seen he's willing to work with Russell Wilson. So all those things line up nicely. I think now you've got to determine, if you're the Broncos, one, is this the guy that you want? And a lot of reports out there suggesting he's the favorite. I think there's an assumption that the Broncos want him, but we just don't know at this point. The Broncos still have a couple of interviews to do here. I believe D'Amico Ryans and Dan Quinn still left to interview. And so the Broncos, first of all, have to decide, is Sean Payton your guy? And I don't think that that's necessarily settled yet. They could have an inkling, but Mike Kliss reported that they're going to have some more guys in here next week, 1 to 3 finalists. So there's going to be a second conversation of sorts. Of course, Phil, we know last year when the Broncos hired Nathaniel Hackett, they planned to bring in 3 finalists. They only brought in 1, and obviously it didn't work out. And so I wonder if that makes Greg Penner a little more likely to bring in multiple people to the building for visits. Before
he wasn't part of that process last year.
Of course. And they might just say, hey, we've got our guy, we're going to move forward. But when I'm sure he's heard about how that process went and talked with George Payton. And if he heard, hey, we brought in Nathaniel, maybe we wish we would have brought in Dan Quinn for a second visit or Kevin O'Connell for a second visit. Maybe Greg Penner is just, you have to balance here, right, with a coaching search, patience versus and getting as much information as you can versus pulling the trigger when you know so you don't lose out on your guy. And I think part of the reason the Broncos hired Nathaniel Hackett when they did last year is because there were rumors of him going to Jacksonville. The Broncos were maybe a little bit worried they were going to lose Nathaniel Hackett. They pulled the trigger, but you've got to balance that.
Yeah, and also maybe you're like, this is our guy.
Yeah,
we want this guy, and then so you just do it.
But if if there's no danger of losing that person, maybe you just take a few extra days and go through the process. And obviously, if there's not as many vacancies this year, which I think helps the Broncos. Last year there were 9 vacancies. This year I believe there's 5. Doesn't really. I don't know that there's a great job out there or like a job that stands above all the rest. I mean, some places, a lot of media outlets view the Broncos as that best possible option. But it's not like you're worried about, especially if it's Sean Payton, he's got to also decide he wants to go somewhere. And so I don't think he's going to be like, oh, well, the Broncos are taking a few extra days. I'm going to go to Carolina instead, or I'm going to go to Houston instead.
I think if anything, based off of like the reporting that I read or paying attention to, I would say that right now with Sean Payton, it's either he's going to come and be the Broncos' next head coach or he's going to go back to TV.
Oh,
that's sort of where it feels like he stands right now.
Interesting.
That's where I sort of feel from his perspective it is. And the other thing that's sort of been interesting about this is that Sean is in the media, and so he's talked about what's going on the Fox pregame show. He's talked about it with Colin Cowherd. One of the things he talked about with Cowherd the other day was, hey, the most important thing to me is the ownership group.
Yep.
And I think that if you're looking at it from that perspective, then this Broncos job is really desirable. You have the wealthiest owners in sports. You've heard from this ownership group saying that winning is really important to them. They'll provide all the resources necessary. I mean, if you're a coach who thinks that that's the most important thing, then what would be better than this job?
Who's got it better than the Broncos?
Yeah, nobody. I mean, that's sort of how I'm viewing it. And so it seems like the other thing that the Broncos have to consider here is, are they willing to make this trade?
Right.
Because the other coaches, of course, you can just sign them and agree to the deal and they'll be the head coach. In this situation, they've got to make the trade with the Saints. And it seems like Sean Payton has been trying to create this sort of notion that it's going to be a mid to late first.
Yeah.
But then there's been other reporting that says that the Saints want 2 firsts, a similar deal to what happened with John Gruden.
Yep.
Which, to me, if it's 2 firsts, if that's a price tag, then I don't see the Broncos. There's no way they could do that. Then again, I would think that Sean Payton is the one who's going to have to be negotiating this with the Saints, and because Sean doesn't want to go to a situation where he's just lost all of his picks. So, like, it's just sort of there's so many layers to this thing that makes the whole Sean Payton situation very interesting to me.
Yeah, and Mickey Loomis said last week, I got to do what's right for the New Orleans Saints. I got to get the most out of this trade. So, of course, the Saints are going to put out to a New Orleans beat writer, Jeff Duncan, respected guy down there, saying that, hey, the Saints are going to want 2 first-round picks. Of course, that's what they're going to say, right?
They're leveraging both sides.
You want 3 first-round picks. You want 4. You want as much as you can possibly get.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that's what the deal ultimately is going to be. And it probably doesn't help the Saints that Sean Payton went out and said, hey, it's going to be a mid to late first-round pick.
That's what I'm saying. They're both using their sides to try and make this thing come to a nice resolution, because at the end of the day, it seems like to me, Sean Payton holds the cards here, because he could just be like, fine, just pay, I just won't coach, and you'll just lose all this opportunity.
Yeah, of
you know
course.
what I mean? So
yeah, and hey, I'll do this next year, and my value will be worth less, and you won't get a first-round pick at all. You'll get a 4th rounder or a 5th rounder or something.
Exactly.
So yeah, the Broncos have to decide, and the Saints have to decide what's worth it. I do agree with you. 2 first-round picks seems steep. Especially, Phil, we're all hopeful that a new coach comes in here. Sean Payton comes in here, if he's the guy, turns this thing around quickly. The Broncos are competing for a wild card spot. But I think after this past year, you cannot rule out that things don't go the way you want again.
yeah, of course, you have to have that be part
You have to think about a worst case scenario here. And so what happens if you go 5-12 again under, for the first time, and now for the second year in a row, you're giving up a top 10 pick. I think that to me, so if you were looking at 2 first-round picks, there's a possibility you would give up your, it's probably going to be like the 28th, 29th, late first-round pick.
Especially
compared
if our guy Brock Purdy.
Exactly.
So he's balling like that, it's going to be 31.
So that compared to giving up that and next year's first-round pick, if that's a top 10 pick, that's a really steep price to pay. And so I would think, if you were the Broncos, you'd want to get through this year, just say, okay, well, we already, we kind of planned to not have a first-round pick this year when we traded for Russell Wilson. We happened to get one back when we sent Bradley Chubb to Miami. If you can make something happen with just that pick and then move forward and say 2024, we're out of the woods. We don't have these restrictions with picks anymore. Yeah, we're back to normal. I think you're in a good place. But yeah, 2 first-round picks, to me, it just sets you back
another year.
And there's guys that are going to have to get paid here. If Russell Wilson does turn it around, you want to make the most of this window. If not, you want to be able to figure out, hey, what's next for us at the quarterback position. So a lot of you're going
to want that pick.
Exactly. And listen, a coach can be worth a lot, I think. And if Sean Payton were to come here, he's shown from his time in New Orleans, 7 division titles, a Super Bowl title, a lot of playoff appearances, obviously. You can see, you can easily see what he can do for an organization. He took the New Orleans Saints, and along with Drew Brees, took that team from being very unsuccessful to having, it's the longest period of sustained success in franchise history.
Yeah.
And so he can be very valuable. But you also, if you have a coach and no players, or you can't find a way to get a right tackle at some point, or you can't find a way to get another edge rusher, or you can't find a way to...
This team needs talent.
Exactly. This is not just a coaching problem. And I think we saw toward the end of the year, Phil, when Jerry Rosburg stepped in, that coaching matters. And you can be better and you can win football games just based off an identity and playing a physical style of football, but you still need good players. And when you look at the teams left in the playoffs, Phil, the reason Brock Purdy is playing so well, and hats off to him because he is playing at a high level, but it helps when you've got George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey there.
And Kyle Shanahan.
And Trent Williams. Yeah, so, of course, Kyle Shanahan. But
it kind of works in both ways with the 49ers.
They've got a lot of talent.
Yeah. It is interesting, though, because Brock Purdy has been playing really well, but everybody's just like, hey, Kyle Shanahan is doing an amazing job there with him. And yes, I think both, like, it's just both have to be true to be playing at that level. Really good coaching and really good players.
Yeah. I mean, in no disrespect to Brock Purdy, but I think if you dropped him in
To a different
several
situation.
other situations, this would not be happening.
True.
I think the talent around him and the fact that Kyle
It's
is doing what Kyle does
Yep.
is setting him up for success. But you still need that talent around him. And, you look at the Bengals, really good football team, but can they withstand all these injuries to their offensive line?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is, doesn't matter how good your play caller is. At some point, you just got to have the guys.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about this Sean Payton trade, if that's what ends up happening, the Broncos have to find this kind of middle ground with the Saints where you're not giving up too much that you're removing all chances of success
Yeah.
versus, giving up enough to make it happen. And luckily, Phil, I don't think it's going to get to the point where it's like a bidding war with the Panthers. I don't think the Panthers are going to say, okay, well, you can have both our first-round picks and the Broncos only have this late first-round pick because, like you said, Sean Payton has
He's
to
in
want
control.
he has to want to go here. So I don't think
Yeah.
he's just going to say, I'll go to whatever team gives the Saints the most. That doesn't make a lot of
No.
sense. So I think what's going to happen here is he's going to interview over the next, I think he's got one more interview left. Maybe
That's what I think so. Yeah.
Carolina, I think on Friday.
Yep. And the Broncos are continuing their process too.
Yeah. And then next week, obviously, if the Broncos were to bring him back in, I think he'd go through this process and then decide, okay, well, hey, I want to coach Arizona or I want to coach Houston or I want to coach Carolina, I want to coach Denver. And then once you make that decision and the Broncos decide, okay, hey, we want Sean Payton, then you finalize the compensation. And the only sticking point, Phil, is what happens if Sean Payton says, okay, I want to go to Denver, and Denver says, okay, I want Sean Payton, and then you talk about the compensation, and the Saints say, we're only doing this if you give us 2 first-round picks. Then it gets sticky because if you're Denver, you say, okay, we don't want to do this, but we don't want to lose our guy, or do you just say, okay, we're backing out and we're going to move on to somebody else? That's when, Phil, this process could drag out and maybe get a little bit dicey.
But I do think that it won't even ever get to that spot. I don't think it'll ever get that late. I think that like all of the parties will be in communication almost. Like I don't think it's just a Broncos Peyton situation removed from the Saints. Like I think Sean is communicating a lot with the Saints and saying, here's what is going to happen here. And I think that they're leveraging both sides. And then I think ultimately the Broncos will be like, we're willing to do this to get Peyton. And then if it's like they're not even close, then I think they'll just back away.
Right, but what if that doesn't happen until, say, next Wednesday?
Yeah, I would just hope that it's a little bit understood at this point. Like, hey, the talks with the Broncos are really serious here. They're on board for this much. Like, are we all in agreement here? And if they're like no, then it's like, okay, they'll move on.
Yeah.
Like,
and anything there would have to be at this point not public because what it sounds like is that they're not on this.
Yes.
I mean, we haven't seen
think
anything
they're trying to publicly leverage each other, but
right. But if they're still trying to publicly leverage each other, then that would make it sound like there's not an agreement in place.
Yeah.
And so then you would get to the point where, are we waiting for till the last minute for this to come together? And then if it doesn't come together, now you've got to hope that maybe this is next Wednesday, next Thursday. Now you got to hope that, okay, well, Dan Quinn doesn't decide, hey, I'm going to Indianapolis.
Yeah, exactly.
Or David Shaw, who, Mike Kliss reported is a strong candidate.
Yeah.
Doesn't say, actually, I'm going to take a year off.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then you're really kind of up a creek.
Yeah,
and
course.
So you've got to.
That would not be a good situation.
This is just it's a little bit tricky here because it's not just about, people are like, oh, well, if Sean wants to go to the Broncos, it's a done deal. No, the Broncos have to want Sean Payton. Sean Payton has to want to go to the Broncos. And then the Saints have to be willing to talk.
Sign off on it.
Because
exactly.
They might say, hey, we don't care if we don't get as much next year. We're not willing to give up Sean Payton for 1 first-round pick. We're not going to do that.
We're just not going to do it. Yeah.
And listen, that
would be crazy.
It would be a little bit crazy, but I think it's something that you could just get to that point and you can't make a deal work.
Yeah.
And listen, Mickey Loomis is not going to just bend over and bend over backwards for the Broncos and
It's
do
in their
whatever they
best. It's in their best interest, though, to sort of play ball. If you ask me, it just makes sense. Like, look, the Broncos are willing to give you a first-round pick. Maybe they go back and forth, and maybe you have to add in a third or a fourth or something in addition. I think then I think you just got to be willing to play ball and just sort of come to a best-case situation here. I think that's what has to happen. The interesting thing to me, Aric, is Sean Payton's resume. I'm assuming the Broncos have done a lot of homework on them. I think that if you hear what you want to hear from him in a meeting, if he answers your questions right, maybe you follow up, you have some more questions, and you have another one. I think then you got to be excited about. I guess what I'm saying is if they heard what they wanted to hear in that interview this week, then I think that ball's got to be rolling. You know what I mean? I think that you're going to be going down that path.
Yeah, well, I do think you've got to, and they've kept these scheduled interviews. You've got to go through these interviews just in case, hey, you hear something from D'Amico Ryans that blows you away, from Dan Quinn that blows you away, because the Broncos interviewed Dan Quinn last year, but Greg Penner has not interviewed Dan Quinn. And so he's got to, I think, for himself, go through this process. And also, I do think you need to have, you don't want to call a coach that has been to a Super Bowl before like a safety net, but I do think you have to have a backup plan here in case, Sean Payton could be your guy, but if you don't have a backup plan in case this trade stuff falls through, or you get to a point where the Saints say, listen, we're just not doing this. We, at a principle, we don't think it's right that he's going to retire and then go to another team a year later. And if he wants to do that, it's going to cost serious draft capital. And how
much would you give up if you're the Broncos? What would you first of all, what do you think a guy like Sean Payton could do? What kind of turnaround here are we talking about?
Well, I mean, in New Orleans, they had an incredible turnaround. Yeah. I think they went from 3-13 to 13-3. Swanson?
To me, he's the kind of guy who would he would come in here and he'd hit the ground running, and the feeling in the building would be like night and day. It would be just a complete 180, if you ask me. Especially from what the Broncos have experienced the last several hires here, first-time guys. He would be like, this is how we do this. This is how we do this. Here's what the standard is. It would just be such a shake-up to the building.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And I just think that that kind of a change can go a long way for this team.
Oh, of course. And I do think there would be questions just in terms of still how does he work with Russell Wilson? What offense are they going to run? Is Sean Payton going to run the offense he's always run and have Russ fit into that? Is he going to do something that's more run heavy that maybe fits better with Russ's skill set?
You think that's being discussed in an interview?
Yeah, of course. It has to be.
And if that's being discussed, does that mean that George Payton is the one who's sort of dictating those things, or is that a Greg Penner, do you think? Because sort of
dictating what?
Well, sort of my understanding is that we talked about Greg Penner's business acumen and his ability to hire high-level executives previously, not necessarily getting into football X's and O's. And so, if the interview group is, Greg Penner, Condoleezza Rice, George Payton, at least for his first one, is the discussion of what the offense looks like, is that who's signing off on, okay, I liked what I just heard here. Is that George saying, this is what I think the offense needs to be, and Sean agreed with me? Or is that Greg being like, this is what I want the offensive identity to be? Because he's not really a football guy.
I mean, hard to know for sure, right? George is involved for a reason, which is that he has that football expertise. Condoleezza Rice has a lot of football expertise from her time working with the college football playoff. So I would say that maybe Greg looks to them, but that's purely speculation.
Yeah, I'm more just speculating. We don't know this stuff.
But I do think Greg has been around this team long enough to see, okay, well, if you're going to put Russell into your system, how do you guarantee that works? Or why are you confident? And I think then, you can get things that even if you're not a football expert and you're not, he's saying, oh, we're going to run a lot of more 12 personnel, or, we're going to 22 personnel. Greg might not be kind of in it to that level, but I think you can still understand, well, hey, we're going to, these are what I think Russell Wilson's strengths are, and these are what I think his weaknesses are. And so here's how we're going to get the most out of him. I think that someone who
more conversational football terms.
Yeah. Maybe you're not going into kind of the deep lingo, the jargon, but I think you can still understand the same way. I would assume that Greg Penner has at least the same football understanding that we do. And so we can understand what we think Russ does well and what he doesn't do well. And so I think Greg can sit there and listen and say, okay, well, yeah, that sounds like it would work. And you never know 100%, but I think you trust Sean Payton, who is an offensive guru, proven, has had a lot of success, and honesty is important here. Hey, can you actually, and it's a different situation than Nathaniel Hackett found himself in, where he interviewed and you didn't know who the quarterback was going to be.
Yeah.
Whereas the Broncos know who the quarterback is going to be, so you can be a lot more specific in terms of the interview and how you're going to make things work and what your plan is. There's not this guessing game of, oh, it could be Aaron Rodgers, it could be Russell Wilson, it could be Drew Lock, it could be Teddy Bridgewater. There a lot of more unknowns when you were doing that interview.
Yeah. No, I mean, Sean, if he agreed to join forces here with the Broncos, he would be saying, I'm confident that I can work and have success with Russell Wilson. So
yeah, no, I think the other element of this that Mike Kliss mentioned in his story is that it's possible Sean Payton gets roster control, which happens around the league. I believe that's how it was set up in New Orleans with Mickey Loomis. But that's also kind of a football decision that Greg Penner will probably have to make, because I would assume George Payton is not deciding who has roster control. I'm assuming that that's a Greg Penner decision.
Yeah.
And so
how does the structure work? Who has these says? Who has the power?
And so when you put yourself at the forefront of a committee like Greg Penner has done, it doesn't matter if you don't plan to make kind of these minute football decisions during the season. You're going to have to make some football decisions here. And the plan was for him not to step in on that. But I think just the state of where the team was, he had to do it.
Yeah.
And so there's a difference between saying, okay, well, you're going to have roster control, or, yeah, we feel confident about you working with Russ, versus like down the line being like in season, like Alberto should be active.
Yeah,
or,
exactly.
This guy should start at left tackle.
Yes.
Once you pick these people and put them in place, let them work and let them do their job. But right now, Greg Penner is going to have to make some football decisions
here. Yeah. It's just sort of interesting thinking about who's in these meetings, and then how into the weeds do they get, and just like, hey, ultimately what is going to determine the success of this team is, are you getting the most out of Russell Wilson? Yeah,
and it's interesting because Mike Kliss reported that this interview with Sean Payton, Raheem Morris, about 2 hours.
Yeah.
We've seen interviews go 4 or 5 hours
all day
over these searches the last few years. So clearly there's a focus in terms of what they want to learn from these guys.
Don't waste time.
There might be, we've heard that there could be kind of second visits to UCL Training Center. If that happens, maybe that's a chance for more follow-up for specific things. But it sounds like they're quickly, and that's probably a strength of Greg Penner's from his corporate experience of how do you
waste time.
Yeah, how do you weed through this stuff quickly and find out what's important?
Yep.
But, in my opinion, it shouldn't take 5 hours to determine whether someone's the right fit.
Yeah, exactly.
And so they're doing these interviews quickly. They're finding answers.
And with Sean, I would say what separates him from some of these other candidates is that he's also seeing if this is the right fit for him.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? So he's probably got some questions for, Greg Penner and just trying to understand what he's walking into here. So,
yeah.
Much more than a regular business job interview where you're like, you got any questions for me? And you're like, yeah, like what's the benefit package?
I mean, maybe at like our level, but I do think when you're hiring a CEO or somebody's like I would imagine when Damani Leach came in here as president of the Broncos, that he probably had a lot of questions about, hey, what's my role going to be? How am I going to be allowed to structure things? Can I influence these decisions? I think at these high level roles, it is a little bit. It's got to be a partnership. It's got to be a joint understanding of what the role is going to be. What are the checks and balances? What sort of
like
influence do I have?
Interviewed with him. It's almost like that.
I think they still
kind of like
he's not picking the teams that he's not like I want to interview with the Chargers. Come here, Chargers. Come here.
It's interesting.
Come here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think.
Come here.
What was that, Cy Swanson?
The stuff we have to deal with from you is.
You're the one who's in here.
Well, they demanded it.
Yeah,
not our choice.
Yeah, that's true.
Am I in here with you, or are
nice.
you in here with me?
It kind of makes you
Wow.
think.
Yeah.
It really does.
Are you
make
on?
you
Maybe
think.
you're on the podcast with Swanson.
I don't know.
Maybe it's Swanson's podcast and we just
They've
talk.
misled us. They misled us. Yeah, they make us feel like it's our podcast, but not really. Who knows?
Maybe we're the supervisors.
That's true. What does it mean?
That's a good question.
So just before we wrap up here on Peyton, what do you think is too much? What do you think is the
Yeah,
right?
2 firsts is too much,
Too
in my
much.
opinion.
I think so. I agree.
If you were to give a first and then a late day 2, early day 3 pick next year,
what if it's a first and a third?
I guess you live with that.
I think you live. I think that sounds like a nice
but
middle
that-
ground.
I mean, you're going to get if you pick well, you can get a quality player with a 3rd round pick.
Yeah,
And
of course.
so,
You get Draymond Jones or Justin Simmons. You get somebody
Yeah.
like that.
Greg Dulcich.
Yeah. Dulcich.
There you
You're welcome.
A Sir Lloyd Cushenberry III.
Yeah. Yeah, you could get someone like him.
So you're probably going to get a starter there, somebody
Yeah.
that you intend to start. And so, listen, you only get so many picks. You only got so much room in the salary cap to go spend on free agents.
Is there value in a Sean Payton that you see with that? Does that equal that?
Yeah, I think it would. But that would be a deal where you could it's kind of like both teams would win there.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where you want a deal to be,
No,
right?
I would rather just win.
Oh, got it.
When I do
Yeah.
a deal, I want to just win. I
Yeah.
don't want the other person to win.
Oh, got it. I see.
I want to win-lose
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
compared to a win-win-win,
Of course. Yeah.
right?
Who would all win in that?
Like if you did a trade with like the Seahawks, you would want to win and have them lose.
Yes, but I think that around the league, you want your reputation to be like, this guy's a good business guy.
Yeah.
Everybody wins.
I'd rather just the Broncos win.
Yeah. Looking back at the Seahawks one,
Let's not do that.
yeah,
I think undecided.
yeah. Okay,
Too soon to call.
too soon.
Give us a year.
How about let's move on to topic number 2 here.
On the
which is
radar,
not as important
above the
as
candidate,
first
above the
one.
radar candidates.
The radar. David Shaw reportedly
Right on
very
the radar.
impressive.
Yeah.
in his meeting. A lot of people were just assuming maybe the Broncos were talking to David Shaw because of the Jim Harbaugh connection, and maybe they'd all just get
Pairing.
together and have a win-win-win-win-win.
That's right. We'd all just
Win.
hang out and just do a lot of winning.
Yeah,
There'd be so much winning.
yeah.
You're going to get tired of winning.
Almost too much, but
Yeah.
that's not.
Swanson, you ever get tired of winning?
No.
No.
Nope. You're losing right now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, David Shaw, let's start there. He's interesting.
Oh yeah.
Took over a Stanford program from Jim.
Yep.
Did some really nice things. Things went a little bit.
Swanson, what kind of things did he do there?
What kind of things did he do?
Watson's
Yeah.
watching a movie.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let's see. They went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 consecutive bowls starting in 2011.
Everybody goes to bowls.
Yeah.
Yeah. He went to
How many Pac-12 title
He
games?
went
In
to
the
3
NFL, you
Rose
wanna go-
Bowls.
3 Rose Bowls. That's three.
Christian
That's
winning
3
2.
Pac-12 titles,
Christian
right?
McCaffrey. Ask Josie Jewell about
Oh, yikes!
about that.
Yikes!
Huh?
He was a 4-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year. It's pretty good.
Against them Buffs.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 5 double-digit win seasons.
Pretty good.
That is pretty good.
Things
An impressive resume there.
things tailed off a little bit at the end, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Not so good starting in 2019. They had
Kind of like the
4-win season, then a couple 3-win seasons, and then I'm excluding the COVID season where they only played 6 games.
Smart.
I will say the way that college football is structured nowadays puts Stanford at a notable disadvantage.
Of course, the NIL, the transfer portal, it's harder to recruit and develop and get guys in your program. And certainly David Shaw, I think, was a good example of getting guys there, developing them into talented players. A lot of NFL guys ended up coming through Stanford. In a normal sort of a college situation, to me, like Stanford would be like a dream, right? Like you can play Pac-12 Division I football and also get a Stanford education. Is the Pac-12 still D1?
Wait until this year, my friend.
Okay.
The Pac is going to knock your socks
so
off.
back.
There's
How back is the Pac?
There is so many good teams coming this season in the Pac-12.
And also leaving.
USC, Utah,
They're so good they're leaving.
Oregon. They're going to be really good, the Pac-12. UCLA, these are CU. No,
CU could get all the way to 5 wins.
I'll hold off on the CU, but I do think that the Pac-12 is going to be really good. Washington, I mean, come on.
We're off on all
Oregon State. Oregon State. This is the Pac-12 is going to be really good. Anyway, I would say though, if you were like,
are you done?
Just a high school kid coming out, if you got an offer to Stanford, why would you turn that down? Stanford education, high level Division I football.
So you just said the same thing you just said, but in the other order. The other order.
I'm trying to reiterate this here. Can't handle this. I wonder why. Sometimes I wonder like why I do this. You know what I mean? Like why I do this with you guys. But nowadays, like the landscape has just changed so much that it makes it really difficult for them to have success. And it's possible that David Shaw just said, look, I had a lot of success here. I did everything that I can do at Stanford. And so it's just time for me to sort of bow out.
Yeah, and he's a guy that has always been considered this leader of men. He develops players, rock solid guy, like strong character. He's a great face of a college program, great recruiter. I think those are all things that you look at with David Shaw and think, man, hey, most college programs I think would look at him and say, I'd take him in a second. I think the question is, does that relate? Can that translate to the NFL? And if you go to
a bowl game in the NFL, that's nice.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Broncos went to a Senior Bowl game a few years ago. That was good, right?
No, I'm not talking about that kind of bowl.
Not that bowl.
Not that bowl.
Shrine Bowl?
Nope, not that one either.
Which one? Pro Bowl?
No.
NFLPA Collegiate Bowl.
Yeah. So one of the 6 bowls.
But he was a long-time NFL assistant. Like he had a lot of success too as an assistant coach.
There of course is a difference between succeeding as an assistant and succeeding as a head coach. And not that I don't doubt that he could do it. I just think again it's uncertain.
Exactly.
And I think this goes back to when you look at first-time head coaches. There's a lot of things you have to learn in terms of the structure and how do you put a practice schedule together and what do you do for training camp and all this stuff. And David Shaw definitely has a leg up there because he's done it for so long as a head coach. But there are a lot of differences between college and pro. And you're not going as hard in a pro training camp as you are in college. And you're not dealing with the same meeting restrictions that you are in college. And you're not recruiting. And you've got to deal with big personalities in a way that you don't have to deal with in college. And I'm just guessing that some of the guys that you deal with in the NFL might be a little bit different than the guys you deal with at Stanford. And so you've got to, as a coach, you've got to. You just
said there was a lot of NFL guys coming out of Stanford, but yes.
Well, yeah.
The financial part of it, you're not the sort of the king, And I
also don't think of guys coming out of Stanford as there's not a lot of divas.
Yeah.
You deal with some divas at the NFL level.
That's true.
Or, hey, guys in
you got to manage the personalities.
Guys in Baltimore right now are talking all sorts of
how do you control
nonsense in the locker room? How do you deal with that when in college football your players talk once a week if you decide they talk?
And the Baltimore thing is really interesting because John Harbaugh is such a veteran head coach, and the culture has been so established there. Even a guy like that is having a hard time managing some of these situations.
So, while I think that David Shaw is a great coach and I think it could work here, it's just a question of, are you willing to take a chance again on an unknown? And we've talked a lot, Phil, about the value of having someone who's done this before, who knows exactly what they're doing. And David Shaw's kind of in that middle ground right now where it is still a little bit of a projection. And so if you're Greg Penner, if you're George Payton, Condoleezza Rice, Kerry Walton Penner, Rob Walton, and you're making this decision, you've got to decide, hey, are we comfortable with making a projection? And it's possible that they are. And listen, they probably know David Shaw well. Certainly Condoleezza Rice does from the Stanford connection. So she could say, hey, I've got all the faith in the world that David Shaw, I've seen from him that he can do this.
Yeah.
And it's possible that you could hire him and he could be tremendous. I think there's a good chance that you could hire David Shaw and he could be a really good NFL head coach, and people would, because he's had NFL interest before.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like a few years ago, before 2019, when Stanford was really rocking and rolling, he was getting a lot of buzz.
Yeah,
and he just never jumped at it. But
and there's a possibility that you could hire him and people could end up saying, why wasn't he an NFL coach a long time ago?
Yeah,
he's got everything we want.
It's just not certain right now.
It's just not certain, and so I do think that in terms of these final three guys, or that Mike Kliss has suggested are kind of that big three at the moment, which is Sean Payton, Dan Quinn, David Shaw. David Shaw is the unknown a little bit from that group.
Yeah, in terms unproven. He's known but unproven.
Yeah, unknown at an NFL head coaching level.
Yeah. I do think that you just would have to be willing to go through whatever growing pains he would have adjusting. And maybe that's not that much. Maybe that's a lot. Maybe who knows what that would look like. You just don't know.
Right.
So
Now,
you're projecting a little.
He does seem like he's got that positive mindset, which I could see kind of working with Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
And, if Greg Penner decides, hey, we're going to hire David Shaw, I would imagine that David Shaw would get a more extended period of time to, at least a couple years to figure out, hey, is this going to work? It's not going to be a one and done situation, even if it doesn't go well.
It could also be like, hey, a David Shaw, you would have confidence in him coming in and instilling a culture.
Yeah.
And like saying, I think if that was like really a top priority, I think David Shaw could come in and do that, just because he's ran the ship before. It's just been at a college level, so. And there is something to be said for coaches that succeed at a place like Stanford, where if you can do it with that level of talent, our guy Fitz, of course, before the dark years. Would you say like Northwestern is sort of like a Stanford? Is that what you're trying to say here?
Yes, I would say that.
Really?
Yeah. Would you not say that?
I already decided not to comment on this.
Interesting. I would say that, yeah, they are the same.
You would?
Yeah. They compete for the same way. They're like Duke. Those schools are kind of the same. Power Five.
Do you think like a Duke, a Northwestern, and a Stanford are the same?
Yeah. In terms of what you're dealing with there.
Yeah.
And so like David Cutcliffe, the fact that you succeed at Duke with not the same level of talent that a North Carolina gets.
To just get.
He's not there anymore.
And well, I know he's not there, but just he succeeded there for a long time.
Yeah. He knows Peyton Manning. Okay.
Carolina just got all these recruits coming in. They don't play well.
They reload.
Yeah.
They don't have to rebuild.
No.
Yeah.
I like that when you're doing more with less.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you look at some coaches and it's like, okay, well, you're winning.
Like a Nick Saban. I mean, what does he even do? He just got all the talent.
Point,
you know what I mean?
point.
I don't like that.
Yeah, he's only won like 19 national championships.
I
What is that?
I wouldn't like it.
Yeah. But I think you look at like Urban.
Oh.
He did a lot with a lot.
He did.
And then
it didn't work.
Didn't work.
Yeah. It didn't work. But I wouldn't compare Urban Meyer and David Shaw.
I was saying I think I was saying they were about as different as they could possibly be.
Yeah. I do think that he could come in and develop a culture here.
Urban Meyer?
David Shaw.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Would be a culture.
Yeah.
Very different one.
Urban's culture would just be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not cool.
But there would be
Different.
some learning and trying to manage different situations that he didn't have to do that at Stanford. So, What about a Dan Quinn?
Yeah, I mean, a good candidate. And I think once you get to David Shaw and Dan Quinn, the fan base is going to be, some people are going to be really receptive and some people are going to have questions or not be thrilled about the choice.
Yeah, safe does not equal really excitement from the fan base.
Yeah, and I don't even know if safe is the right word, more like just there's no like spark to it, or there's no like there's no buzz, or not as much buzz.
Yes.
And
I think safe. I mean, I think that I would consider Dan Quinn as sort of a safe.
Yeah, Dan Quinn maybe. David Shaw, I'm not sure I would say safe just because there's an unknown factor there, but yeah, you're not going to make crazy headlines. Like if you were to get Sean Payton, the Broncos would, despite how they played last year, I still think get some good national TV
good buzz
spots. People would be talking about all offseason, hey, can Sean Payton turn this thing around? You've got Andy Reid and Sean Payton in the same division, two offensive minds, Josh McDaniels, I
think Andy Reid is actually good. That's sort of an interesting thing because like when he came in, like he just changed everything with Kansas City,
Yeah.
And so like maybe Sean Payton could do a similar type of thing here.
But I don't think when Andy Reid went to Kansas City, I think there was some skepticism because of how things ended in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Obviously never won a Super Bowl, had the clock man, it kind of used to hear with Andy Reid, like clock management. Funny how when you get Patrick Mahomes, you don't worry about that anymore. It's like 10 seconds. Who cares?
So,
who cares if we call a timeout?
Yeah.
So with Sean, I think there'd be all that buzz. If it were Dan Quinn, there might not be that buzz. But the bottom line, Phil, is if you win in the fall or you get this team back to a good place, it doesn't matter how much buzz there is in January or February or March. It matters what do you do when you get to the season. And I think Dan Quinn would still be very capable of helping this team, setting a standard, building a culture, having an identity.
It's kind of like a John Fox type of sort of move.
Yeah, just get an adult in here and get things back on the tracks. I think Dan Quinn would work really well with George Payton. We know Greg Penner respects George Payton, so to kind of have that partnership there, you could find some stability probably in your front office and at your head coaching position. And Dan Quinn, of course, had some success in Atlanta, got to a Super Bowl. People say, including me, think, oh, okay, well, once Kyle Shanahan left, they didn't have as much success. They still, I think, made the playoffs after Kyle Shanahan was gone and won a playoff game. And so it's not like things just collapsed without Kyle Shanahan. Dan Quinn was still a quality head coach, and things just didn't work out there in Atlanta at the end. But as we talk about with any of these guys, Phil, if you're a second-time head coach or third-time head coach, it's because you've been fired somewhere. And that's just what happens in this league is guys lose jobs and then they go back and they succeed elsewhere. But yeah, Dan Quinn, he's a player's coach. He would be a very steady, strong choice as well.
I think the thing with Dan is you'd have to know what his plan is for the offensive side. Like who are you going to bring in? Who's going to run that side? Who's going to work with Russ? Obviously, Dan knows Russ, but who knows what that relationship is like just because he was the defensive coordinator in Seattle. So it would just be sort of like I'd have more questions about what his plans were there, in terms of a staffing and just sort of how he would want to operate.
You'd have to have the same questions with David Shaw, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he's an offensive guy. And so,
but who's the staff?
Yeah. Is he going to call plays? Is Dan Quinn going to call defensive plays?
Yeah. Shaw's staff, actually, but that's a sort of an interesting thing, just because who does he know like around the NFL strongly that could come in and work with him?
Yeah. I mean, that's with any of these guys, who can you bring in that's going to work well and make things happen here?
Yeah.
But yeah, with Dan, you're right. The offensive plan, we heard Greg Penner in the end of season press conference say that offensive identity has to be part of the decision. And so if you hire a defensive minded head coach, that's not disqualifying by any means, but you have to have a plan. And so I'm sure when they meet with him, reportedly going to be on Friday, that they go in depth there and say, okay, well, who are you going to hire? If that person falls through, who do you get? Because I think one of the things that happened with Nathaniel Hackett is when he was putting his staff together, we saw all these reports of, they want Adam Stenavich from Green Bay. They want Luke Getsy. It didn't happen. Justin Outen comes in. I'm sure at other position coaches, the same thing likely happen. And so what do you do when plan A doesn't go exactly the way you want? And so that's got to be a conversation with Dan Quinn, with David Shaw, with Sean Payton, any of these guys. If you can't get exactly who you want as your defensive coordinator or your offensive coordinator, what's plan B? What's plan B? What's plan C over here?
Yeah, like if you can't get Vic Fangio, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You got to have answers.
You got to have answers because things aren't perfect in the NFL, and it's all about how do you handle adversity. And we hear that a lot, like once you get to the season, but it's also about how do you handle adversity when you can't get the coach that you want, or you can't, you lose a player to injury, or, there's a bunch of other things that happen outside of the season that are critical that you respond to in the right way.
Yeah. What do you think about the structure in terms of the organization? Because with Sean Payton, it feels like the structure would be different than with like a Dan Quinn, and just in terms of how everything operated.
Yeah. I mean, well, it sounded like from the press conference that the coach is going to report to Greg Penner regardless, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of decided. So it'll be more, the last decision is who has roster control. And you're right. I would think that with Sean Payton, based on what Mike's reported, that Sean would probably end up with final roster control, or at least have a really big say in that. Whereas I could imagine a world where if it's David Shaw or Dan Quinn, that George Payton would retain roster control, and those guys would kind of work with George to determine some of these decisions. That's just a guess, but I think Sean maybe has earned that a little bit because you've seen it work again. Yeah. And I keep going back to, what do you know works? What have you seen work? What is not just speculation or projection or, a guess? And so you've looked at Sean Payton, you've seen, okay, well, it works when he makes these roster decisions. He can build a division championship team.
Yep.
And listen, they beat the Saints twice, or beat the Bucs twice, right? When Tampa went to the Super. I think this was the first year that Tampa. This was the first year that Tampa beat the Saints, and so Sean Payton did not have as talented. Did not have as talented of a team, but it was able to go in and beat a Super Bowl contender twice. I think if you're the Broncos, you look at the Chiefs and you say, okay, well, Sean's not just going to come in here and the Broncos are going to be guaranteed 2 losses against the Chiefs every year.
I was going to say that would come in handy when Tom Brady's with the Raiders.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That could be really nice.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Makes you think.
It does.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else you want to say about the coaching situation right now?
It's interesting that I understand why they're doing it. I just would kind of reemphasize there's a balance here between taking your time and getting all this information and interviewing everybody and bringing people back in, and just like you said, once you know, go.
Yeah.
So that you don't lose out on who you want. And I think it's a little bit different. If you want Dan Quinn and everybody else is competing for him, you might have to move a little bit faster. If it's David Shaw, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think David Shaw's only interviewing with the Broncos.
Yeah, I've not heard his name out there.
And so you probably got a little more time if you want it to be David Shaw. If you want it to be Sean Payton, I also think you have a little bit more time because
it does seem like he's mostly interested.
And there's a process here, right? Where like
with the Saints,
he can't just today agree to the Panthers. Hey, I'm going to go coach the Panthers without there also being the Saints element in there. Mm-hmm. So I'll be interested to see how quickly things move. I'll be interested to see when do the Broncos kind of pounce at the person that they want. And I'll be really interested if who knows if this even gets out there. I would imagine it would. If the Broncos try to get something done with Sean and they can't because of trade compensation, then things get really interesting.
Yeah. It's
interesting in a bad way.
Yes. I would agree.
Just to clarify.
Yes. You would not want that to get out there and then have to sort of like...
That would get out there though, right?
Yeah, and then have backtrack and be like, I guess we'll just end up hiring.
I can't see a world where...
That would not be good.
Where the Broncos decide Sean Payton's their guy and they start to meet with the Saints and then it just never gets out there that they...
Yeah, you just wonder...
That would be surprising.
You wonder if some of that's gone on already.
Yeah, of course.
And we haven't heard anything about it, so...
It's also possible that something happened with Jim Harbaugh and we just didn't hear about it.
Something happened. It's possible.
Possible that something happened.
Yeah, so it is.
There's your reported update.
I do think that, something happened. I do think, just like from my perspective,
one of my favorites.
Bringing in a guy like Sean Payton would I think we're talking about like two different worlds here. You know what I mean? Like you bring in a guy like Sean Payton, like I think you're like God, like a guy, you know what I mean? Where you're like, you're just sort of like in a different situation. It would be like Mike Shanahan walking around the facility. You know what I mean? Like you would have somebody like of high stature league, you know what I mean? Like his reputation around. I think that David Shaw would have a similar sort of just, you know, you'd be like, whoa, there's David Shaw, but not to the same extent. You know what I mean? Like, I just think Sean Payton would be like a different
David Sean Payton
situation. Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you. My only cautionary tale is that was funny, Swanson.
Cautionary tale.
We thought the same.
Swanson's good for just going like this, or you're like, oh, okay, thank you, thank you. You like that, Swanson?
We cut the last one out. I'm gonna turn your mic off. Stop making noises. You're scaring the audience. We thought when Russell Wilson came in.
All right.
We did. We thought when Russell Wilson came in that he was going to transform the building. And I think in a lot of ways he did in terms of the attitude and the mindset of guys and like the way things went during the offseason. Like I do think Russell Wilson transformed the place, but it didn't result in wins. And so at the end of the day, you can hire Sean Payton and you can, you know, talk about the division titles and the Super Bowl trophy and all the success he's had. That's all great. And there will be more buzz going into next year. You still got to find a way to win. And until that happens, you know, I think a lot of fans will reserve judgment probably fairly after the way the last 7
buzz
years.
Is not everything, but I would say that unlike Russell Wilson, a head coach coming in is going to say he's dictating the terms. Here's what practice is going to look like. Here we're going to go
Russell
like this.
Wilson
We're going to
dictate the terms.
He didn't say no starters are playing in the preseason. He didn't say, hey, we're going to have a light training camp. He didn't dictate all of those things.
He said a lot. He said, wait, we're going to go to San Diego and we're going to have workouts. We're going to have early morning walkthroughs all the time. I mean, I think a head coach is in more control of what the vibe and feel is like. All I'm saying is that the Broncos got a quarterback last year, and everyone said, the Broncos are the Broncos. Yes. We talked about, hey, a good season would be going to the divisional round and maybe getting to the AFC Championship.
Yes,
and then the Broncos had 5 wins.
I would not buy into the buzz the same way ever again.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. Is
I've
just
been hurt.
Be careful of the buzz, because
I'm incapable of love.
You got to show on the field. It can be great, and people can say, "Oh, Sean Payton changed everything." I mean, that's what you're going to hear from players, right? Oh, hey, Sean, he's got the Super Bowl experience. It's, you know, it's different around here. We got a coach, we're going to play offense the way we should. This defense is going to play at the same level. I'm going to come back 10 pounds lighter. And I'm, the same stuff you hear every offseason from every team.
Yeah.
Go do it.
Yes, of course. You heard me once. Shame on you.
Yeah.
For me twice. Strike 3.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Never again. All right. Any shout outs, Eric? We don't have any voicemails or emails this week.
No. That's sad.
I think there is a problem with the voicemail machine.
Swanson screwed something up.
There's a.
Well, just send in one. We'll see if we get it.
Yeah. 707 neutral. 707 neutral.
Yeah.
Neutralzoneshow@gmail.com. At Aric DiLalla with an A. At Phil Milani with a PH. Those are non-traditional.
Yep.
Or at Denver Broncos if you're feeling crazy.
Don't do that.
Shout out to Jokic.
Thank you. That's what I normally do, but yes.
I'm on board.
Most definitely.
Give him a third MVP.
You know what? I don't want to hear voter fatigue. I don't want to hear it. Back-to-back 30-point triple doubles. Eric.
Who?
Yeah. Nikola Jokic.
Never heard of him.
Yeah. That's your fault. That's your problem.
Is that the Denver Sports Serbia thing? You
should just appreciate greatness.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
I think I'm at that point now where I'm just like.
Are you at the point where like how well he's playing now? You're kind of like, okay, he should be the MVP this year, but maybe he didn't deserve it 2 years ago.
No, he deserved everything he's gotten.
He's worked for it all.
He's playing even better now.
Right. So maybe this should be the only one. Maybe they should redact the two.
Do you know what I don't like it in the NBA where it's like always just so much, well, what about Embiid? What about this? Blah, blah. Let's just appreciate this guy.
But we should appreciate him more than others.
We're all able to watch greatness. Do you know what I mean?
I thought if you live in Denver, you can't.
Let's not hate.
I thought part of the problem was you can't watch greatness, right?
I watch it on ESPN and TNT.
But not the other games, right?
When I can, I watch.
Let's appreciate not watching greatness.
I'm just trying to say, let's just remove the hate part of this and just say, look, this guy is
asking questions.
Well, there's a lot of hate around him, or there has been for a long time. True. And I'm just sort of sick of that now. I just want to appreciate. Let's just appreciate.
You should start a basketball podcast.
That we are all alive during a time when he plays basketball.
Wow.
That's what That's where I'm at.
Where's this energy for LeBron?
There should be that.
No, no one has more hate for LeBron than you.
What?
Lives up in your hair. That's why it's so big.
True. It's not true.
Full of hate.
I appreciate everything he's done, and I enjoy watching him play this sport.
Got to be
that's where I'm at.
All-time leading scorer.
Yeah,
Jokic.
Soon.
LeBron. Yeah. Let's just appreciate that this guy's still playing.
LeBron.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out LeBron.
Yeah. Any other?
One of our listeners, Bo. Shout out to Bo.
Big fan of the show.
Yep.
Shout out, Bo.
Yeah, Liz Gerald's.
Liz Gerald's doing some nice stuff in the community. There was a MLK Parade.
Yeah. Phil, you and I were there.
Yep.
Ben, I didn't.
I was there.
Oh, that's what I did hear a little in the back. So
kind of a murmur.
That's it. I'm not laughing anymore in the podcast. Phil make a joke?
Nope. Silence. That's what I'm used to.
Shout out to Zohair.
Zohair. Yeah. Another fan who listens all the time, Bella.
Yeah, shout out.
Shout out, Bella. Big fan. So a couple of fans. Would be nice to get some voicemails.
That would be nice.
But
anybody else?
We'll do those shout outs. Jokic was pretty good for me. Just every
that was nice.
Weekly standing on this show.
That's true.
And Nikola Jokic. How about the Avs too, huh? They're coming around.
Couldn't tell you.
I don't know.
It's starting to turn.
Tell you.
They beat Calgary this week.
Wow.
They beat, I think it was Ottawa earlier in the week.
No.
I think they're starting to get healthy.
Declaring war on Canada.
Things are starting to, you doubt a Stanley Cup champion and then they show their greatness, you know?
Is that a saying?
I just said it. Yeah.
That normally means it's not a saying.
That's true. That is true. Okay. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. We'll be back next Thursday. Who knows? We might
have a coach.
Sean might be right in here with us. David Shaw might be in here.
Dan Quinn.
Swanson next week. Dan Quinn right here. Or maybe Swanson too.
Yeah. It'll just be Swanson.
And it could just be Swanson. Who knows? Really hard to tell.
Really.
But we'll be back next Thursday.
You betcha.
It'll be an exciting week.
Yeah.
Anything could happen. Until then, for Ben Swanson and Aric DiLalla, I'm Phil Milani. You've been listening to
The Neutral Zone.